So here's the question that sounds like a conspiracy theory, but is actually a map reading problem. What is hidden under the Brandenburger Tor? Most people expect a secret Nazi bunker or a locked room full of files. What you really have under and around Berlin's most famous gate is something more practical, and in some ways more impressive. Layers of infrastructure and history stacked like a timeline. Right below Pariser Platz, you're crossing modern transport tunnels, the S-Bahn Nord-Süd Tunnel and the U5 station Brandenburger Tor about 17 meters down. And decades before that, in 1884, the gate's foundation was even cut for an oval sewage canal, a hidden engineering decision that still affects the monument today. Now let's use that idea, layers, to hunt the real hidden Berlin, the bunkers that survived, changed purpose, or disappeared completely. Before the bombs, Berlin was already building underground, not for war, but for a growing city. The U-Bahn started expanding in the early 1900s, the S-Bahn Nord-Süd Tunnel began in the 1930s, and the ground beneath the center became a mesh of stations, utility corridors, and basements. Then, war changed the purpose of Under Berlin. Air raids forced the city to create shelter fast, and not only with new builds. Some of the most fascinating Berlin bunkers are conversions, structures that weren't designed as bunkers at all. A perfect example is the Fichtebunker in Kreuzberg. It began life in 1883-84 as a stone gasometer, a circular industrial giant. In late 1940, it was rebuilt into a multi-level air raid shelter with thick walls, emergency power, ventilation shafts, kitchens, and hundreds of small chambers. The before image is a 19th century energy facility. The after is a vertical survival machine. At the same time, Berlin also built massive purpose-built shelters. Near the ruins of Anhalter Bahnhof, a huge above-ground bunker was completed in 1942. Under Alexanderplatz, a two-level deep shelter was constructed during the war for around 3,500 people, one of the largest in the city. And in neighborhoods like Schöneberg, concrete giants like the Hochbunker Pallasstraße appeared, ugly, indestructible, and impossible to ignore. That mix, industry, transport, war planning, and later everyday life, is what makes Berlin's bunker story different. Now we jump to the moment those spaces were actually tested.
When the air war reached Berlin, capacity stopped being a number on paper. It became the distance between life and death, measured in minutes, stairs, and doors that could actually be closed. Fichtebunker shows what that looked like in extreme form. The converted gasometer had 6 levels, with a ring of small chambers on each level, plus kitchens, boilers, and emergency power. On the night of 2-3 February 1945, it was packed far beyond its planned limit. Reports speak of around 30,000 people squeezed inside. Imagine the sound: ventilation fans, footsteps on concrete, children crying, and above it all, the blunt rhythm of bombing. Across the city, shelter wasn't only deep underground. The Hochbunker at Anhalter Bahnhof was built as a giant block of reinforced concrete with multiple floors above and below street level. It was designed to protect thousands, but during the heaviest raids, it held many more. After 1945, it didn't disappear. It was too massive to remove, and that physical fact shaped the afterstory we'll reach in the next chapter. Then there's a bunker that feels like it was designed specifically for a before-after reveal, the Luftschutzanlage in Gesundbrunnen. It sits inside the U-Bahn station structure, so close to the transport network that demolishing it later would have risked the tunnels. That is one reason it survived intact. Today, it's one of the clearest time capsules of how Berlin tried to make a subway station double as protection. Under Alexanderplatz, the scale becomes almost abstract. The deep shelter was built during the war in a huge foundation block that already existed from earlier transit planning. The point is important. Berlin's underground layers often reuse older layers. The Alexanderplatz bunker was planned for roughly 3,500 people, and it sits under one of the busiest public squares in Europe. And finally, the bunker that refuses to be just history, Hochbunker Pallasstraße. Built between 1943 and 1945, it was constructed with forced labor, and later it became part of Cold War civil defense planning. Its mass is the reason it still stands, and why, decades later, a housing complex had to be built around it instead of replacing it. One bunker became a symbol, but it wasn't under the Brandenburger Tor. Hitler's Führerbunker sat under the garden of the former Reich Chancellery. It was blown up, stripped, and later built over, a reminder that some underground sites don't survive as places, only as locations. And this is why Pariserplatz and the government quarter still attract hidden bunker rumors. In Berlin, the true secret is often boring: stairwells, sealed shafts, service corridors, until you realize those boring structures once decided who could survive a night of bombing. Around the area, you'll also hear about a so-called Adlon bunker, a name that appears in reports and urban lore, but it's not publicly accessible and hard to verify. This is the core catastrophe chapter for Berlin bunkers, not a single explosion, but a sustained pressure that reshaped the city into an underground network of survival spaces, some obvious, many hidden behind normal doors, basement corridors, or sealed shafts. Today, Berlin's bunker after story is less about war and more about what a city does with concrete it can't easily erase. Start with what you can actually visit. Fichtebunker is now a guided time capsule. The same circular shell that stored gas in the 1880s and sheltered civilians in 1945 later became a refugee shelter, a home for the elderly, even a youth detention site, and for decades it served as a storage reserve for the city. Tours let you show before and after in one shot: industrial brick outside, bunker corridors inside. The Anhalter Bahnhof bunker went through a similar transformation. After being used as a wartime air raid shelter, it survived the post-war demolition waves and was later used for West Berlin's strategic reserves. Today, it operates as the Berlin Story Bunker with exhibitions, an example of how a structure built for protection became a place of documentation. At Gesundbrunnen, the after is almost the opposite. Not a reinvention, but preservation. Berliner Unterwelten restored the air raid shelter inside the station and turned it into a place where the original logic of civil defense is still readable, from signage to room layout. Hochbunker Pallasstraße is the most visible after in the city skyline. It stands under heritage protection and became a memorial site. Functionally, it was long tied to telecommunications and later civil defense planning. Visually, it's the perfect before-after contrast, a war bunker wrapped by a 1970s housing megastructure. And then there are places you can't enter, but must mention. The Alexanderplatz deep bunker remains closed and unfinished in its equipment level. In the 1960s, the DDR even considered it for a potential government use scenario during the square's redesign, but it stayed a raw shell and is still locked. On the surface, Berlin has even turned some bunker-looking relics into completely new urban functions. One example is Der Kegel on the former RAW site in Friedrichshain, a concrete cone structure that today is used as a climbing spot and event location. It's a reminder that after can mean anything from museum to sports. The Führerbunker is the clearest answer to the "is there a way in" question. No legal access. The site was destroyed in stages, filled, and built over. Today, you only get an information panel at street level. And that brings us back to the opening hook. Under the Brandenburger Tor, you don't find a secret bunker. You find Berlin's modern transport layers. The secrets are nearby, scattered, and often hidden in plain sight. Finally, Berlin keeps surprising even professionals. During subway construction or demolition projects, sealed chambers and tunnel stubs sometimes reappear, rooms with old fittings, signage, or inventories that nobody has touched for decades. That's the real hidden Berlin, not one secret bunker, but constant rediscovery. Berlin's bunkers are not one story. They're a catalog of layers. A gasometer turned into a shelter, a railway bunker turned into a museum, a subway station that still hides an intact air raid layout, a Cold War-ready concrete block wrapped by modern housing, and beneath Alexanderplatz, a huge, deep bunker that exists but stays locked. So if you remember one thing from this video, let it be this. In Berlin, hidden rarely means mysterious. It usually means built for a purpose, then forgotten, reused, or sealed. And the next time you walk past the Brandenburger Tor, you'll know what's really under your feet. Tunnels, utilities, and the logic of a city that had to survive its own history. If you want more Berlin Underground, including the giant flak towers and the tunnel systems that shaped the city, hit subscribe and pick the next video from the Satellite playlist.